Your phone lights up with a name you used to be excited to see. You look at it for a second. You think about answering. And then, without quite deciding to, you turn it face down on the table and go back to what you were doing. No guilt, no drama. Just the small, quiet realization that a version of you would have grabbed that phone immediately 2 years ago. And a newer version of you, the one currently in the room, simply didn't. If you've noticed yourself doing things like this lately, you've probably wondered, somewhere quiet, if you're turning into someone cold. You aren't. What's happening to you is not a personality decline, and it's not antisocial. It's a specific, nameable shift that most people who go through it never get told the actual word for. They weren't getting colder. They were finishing a job they had been doing, without knowing it, for most of their lives. And they were starting, gently, to set it down. Here are 7 signs that's what's happening to you. One of them, fair warning, is going to be uncomfortable. 1. You don't reach out anymore, and you've stopped feeling guilty about it. You used to keep relationships alive on your own back. The check-ins, the thinking of you texts, the lunches you initiated. Lately, you've stopped, and what genuinely surprised you is that the guilt that used to follow that stopping has faded, too. Here's what's underneath it. For a long time, the reaching out wasn't really connection. It was maintenance, a quiet tax you were paying to keep relationships from disappearing. The guilt that came when you stopped paying it was guilt for failing the role. It dissolved the moment some part of you noticed that nobody else's had been paying it either, and the friendships that ended when you stopped trying were friendships that had been held up by your effort alone for a long time. You're not antisocial. You stopped doing unpaid labor in relationships that were never going to do it back. 2. Small talk now feels physically draining in a way it didn't 5 years ago. You can still do it. You're not bad at it. But where you used to glide through the weather, the weekend plans, the non-committal pleasantness, you now feel an actual cost, like a battery dropping by visible percentages while you stand there nodding. The reason is simple, and most people never name it. Small talk doesn't require you to share information. It requires you to perform interest, to fake an engaged signal at a level your body isn't actually feeling, and your nervous system, after enough years of doing that, seems to quietly refuse to keep generating the signal on demand. You haven't lost the skill. You've lost the willingness to lie that smoothly about being engaged. 3. You've stopped explaining yourself. You used to over-explain. Justify decisions. Soften every no with 3 reasons. Now you say no, and you let the silence sit where the explanation used to be. Other people sometimes find this colder than they expected, and you can tell. But you don't rush in to fix it the way you once did. Here's what changed. The explanations were never really for clarity. They were for managing the other person's reaction in advance, cushioning them, making sure they didn't feel rejected by your no. Stopping the explaining doesn't mean you've stopped caring about people. It means you've stopped treating other adults' emotional comfort as your job to staff. 4. You can be in a room full of people you genuinely like and still feel the urge to leave early. This is the one that's harder to admit to yourself, because it isn't pure liberation. You like the people. You wanted to want to stay, and yet some internal clock goes off, and you want to be alone with a quality that borders on physical urgency. Here is the thing nobody told you about this. The energy a social room takes is not actually about whether you like the people in it. It's about whether you're on. Some part of you is performing presence, tracking the room, generating warmth, being the version of yourself that fits the gathering. That performance is itself the work, and you can run out of bandwidth for it, even in rooms you love. You didn't run out of love. You ran out of capacity for the performance of love. That's not the same thing, and it isn't a flaw. 5. You've gotten very honest about who you actually like. The roster has quietly shrunk in the last few years, and you didn't have a single faulting out to point at. You just stopped maintaining the friendships that were maintained mostly by inertia, the people you saw because you always had, the relationships that existed because nobody had formally ended them. The ones who remain are the ones you actually want to see. Here's what's happening underneath. For years, your performance was propping up a much larger social map than was emotionally real, a map of warm-ish acquaintances held together by effort. Once the performance came off duty, the map updated to match the territory. The smaller circle isn't isolation. It's the first time the count has been honest. 6. Silence with another person no longer feels like a problem to solve. The old reflex, fill the gap, ask another question, keep it moving, is gone. You can sit in 5 quiet minutes with someone and not feel anything is wrong. Most people never notice that filling silence is itself a kind of performing, the performance of being easy, being fun, never being awkward. Letting silence exist between two people is what intimacy was always supposed to feel like, and you could not access it as long as you were running the engine of the conversation. The quiet you can now sit in with another person is not distance. It's the first time you've stopped working in their presence. 7. You feel more like yourself alone than you do in most social situations. This is the heaviest one, and the one that matters most. You are not anti-people. You are simply more you in your own company than in almost any room. And the slightly painful thing this points to is that, for years, your social self was a version, the friendly version, the easy one, the one everyone expected. You didn't know how much editing you were doing until you stopped, and the version of yourself that exists when nobody is watching has begun to feel like the realer one. The performance had been so constant for so long, you had mistaken it for personality. Solitude is where the actual self had been waiting the whole time. One honest note before the close, because this video would be lying without it. Not all of this is enlightenment. Some people stop performing because they've outgrown it. Others stop because they've gone numb, or quietly given up, or are calling avoidance growth. The difference matters. Here is the test, and you probably already know your answer to it. Does your solitude feel like rest, or does it feel like hiding? If it's rest, everything above applies to you. If it's hiding, everything above is true, and you have one more thing to look at honestly. Both are survivable. Only the first is freedom. So no, you probably aren't antisocial. You spent the first half of your life on duty, performing warmth, performing availability, performing the version of yourself that the room expected. You are not cold now. You are simply, for the first time in your adult life, off duty. And the strange, quiet truth of being off duty for the first time is that you start finding out who you are when no one is watching, and you realize with a small grief and a larger relief that you should have been allowed to meet that person years ago.